Welcome back, everyone. You are watching the Vintage Sewing Machine Garage YouTube channel. And yes, this channel is dedicated to the restoration and conservation of vintage sewing machines. The reason you see what is today a vintage steam iron is not because I've taken up the hobby of restoring steam irons. I'm sure that there are people who do. This is actually an iron I use for myself. I don't use one very often, but I have it here today because I'm getting ready to do the final test stitching for my Pfaff Model 30. This is a video that has been long in the making because I have had all these other videos showing you from the time I got the machine, going through, inspecting, cleaning, restoring, lubricating, and adjusting this sewing machine. This is an iron that I think I got this iron in a thrift store somewhere. It is a GE Self-Clean Mark II. And it's circa 1972-ish or so. I'm guessing this by the colors that it is, but it works just like any steam iron does, and if you're not careful, it also can dribble. So, but the reason that I have this iron here is actually not to talk to you about irons, but to talk to you about test stitching and fabrics. And the reason I like to do this is because in order to know how a sewing machine is operating, is it a happy machine? Is everything set up properly? I've mentioned to you all before that you don't need computer programming or software to beep at you or give you codes. You just need to know your machine and listen to it. You can tell by the sound it's making, or almost always by the stitch it forms. So when you want to see how your machine is doing, you can take scrap pieces of fabric. Let's say you are restoring your machine, or maybe your machine just needs an overhaul and you're trying to fix it. Obviously, you don't want to waste really good fabric, or you don't want to learn when you're trying to sew any kind of project. Oh, I guess my machine's not working well. So you take test scraps. The reason the iron was there is to remind you all, and to remind myself. Sometimes if I'm in a hurry, I want to do some test stitching, I have a lot of scrap fabrics that I hold on to, and I'll cut a piece and I'll fold it over and make a sample. Well, you can do that, and the machine doesn't seem to care. However, one of the things we know about sewing machines is that sometimes if your stitches are not forming properly, especially if the tension on the thread is too tight, what can happen is your fabric will pucker. The thread is so tight it will literally cause the fabric to wrinkle or pucker. Well, it's a lot easier to tell if that's happening if your fabric is pressed and flat. So if I have fabric that's, it's got folds and wrinkles in it, and I just, I cut it and just put it under the machine, yeah, I can test the stitches, but I really should be pressing the fabric, which sounds like a kind of a fancy formal thing to do, but I really need to know that the machine, if it's not puckering on pressed fabric, I should be good to go. If it is puckering, is it the stitch, is it the thread tension or other issues with the stitch? Or is it simply because I did not take the initiative to press the fabric? So that is one of my promises to myself that I'm going to try to do better on that, because how do you know if the fabric's going to wrinkle if it's already wrinkled or puckered up? All right, so here we have, this is I'd say a medium weight cotton canvas fabric, and I've got 2 layers right now. And we're going to see what the machine has to say to us. Now, and I'm also going to share something with you that I noticed. I don't know if any of you did. Any of you who have this machine, you may have seen it. And if you did, if you caught my mistake there, please tell me in the comments. I like it when you guys do that, because even those who teach and instruct have to learn, and we all do. Okay, so let's see here. We've got a light. Do I need that? No, that's going to create glare in everyone's face. We don't need it. But all right, let's come down. I'll start here, everyone, and then I'll we'll change the angle, give you a little bit of a more of a close-up. And so we'll start here. I like to start with my needle down. And, oh, by the way, for those of you who know this machine, I wonder if you got this. In one of the earlier videos, I was talking about the stitch length regulator. And very often, many machines, when you have it all the way down, this is true of almost every Singer I've ever worked on, the longest stitch length is usually with the lever in the lowest position. Well, that's not true here. Because upon closer inspection, the longest stitch length is up here. In fact, right there, and it's not really easy to see in this light. In fact, it's difficult even for me to see. Right at the top of my thumb, that is 0. If I go anywhere below that, I'm going to have no stitches and possibly a mess. So I need to make sure that, and Pfaff did give me a little black pointer piece here. Right there is 0. So anything I want in terms of stitch length, I got to be above that. So we're going to start, as I like to always start, with the highest or the longest stitch length. Now, right now it's on 4, and what does that mean? Is there something wrong with the stitch length adjustment? No, there's something, it's waiting for me to loosen this knob. Remember, this knob is here to allow you to set the stitch length so that the length lever will not come out of adjustment as you are sewing. All right, so we've already tested. We believe the machine likes to run, so let's see what it does when we ask it to sew a stitch. I'm going to lower us down just a bit there. All right. Going slow just to see what the machine has to say. We'll do a back tack. There we go. We'll come over. You know, when I first was toying around with the machine, seeing how it might accelerate, it actually is giving me not bad slow needle control. I was concerned it might be running a little too fast, but I'll have to let any prospective buyer take a look at it and see what they think. So, all right, so I'll come down and I'll run the machine more quickly, a little faster speed, same long stitch length. And it's certainly happy to back stitch for us, or back tack. All right. Not quite the slow needle control you might get on, say, a carbon pile foot pedal, such as the Singer button style, but not bad. Not bad at all. Okay, so we're going to now, let's shorten our stitch length. And remember, on this machine, right there, about midway, that's 0. So when I loosen this knob and I come down, I'm just going to, let's come to, come down just below number 2. All right. Now, we'll come down more at the level of the bed of the machine, and we'll zoom in. You guys can get a little bit better picture of what's happening here. So we should still, when you have your short stitch on any vintage machine, always make sure that the machine is going to feed fabric. It's feeding, but not very quickly. Let's come back up just a bit. All right, fabric is feeding slowly, but it is feeding. That was me changing the speed there with my foot. And we'll do some back tacking. And remember, if you have set the stitch lever adjustment with this knob, you've got to loosen the knob, because if you're just used to going and hitting back tack or reverse, you know, it's going to fight with you. It's waiting for you to do what you need to do. to allow it to go and lock in the stitch, and there we go. Okay, tell you what, everyone, let's I'm going to pull the needle up. I am curious to see what the machine is doing and what the stitches look like, and also on the back. Let's see what our bottom, we have a top and a bottom stitch. We'll see what it looks like. All right, first we'll take a look at the top. This is our sort of a lavender purple color. Wow, so the first row of stitches is up here on the top row. Nice and straight, nice and balanced. I'm not seeing any puckering, I'm not seeing any looping. You can see, let's put this down on the table. That actually might make it a little more stable for you all to see it. And let's see what we've got. So, we come across the top here. Got a long stitch, and that's the longest stitch it makes, and then you can see where I back tacked. It was very happy to do so. Right here, nice and flat, you come over, and then I ran, remember the second row that I did, make sure we get more of this in the actual shot. This second row of stitches, I came faster. I wanted to see will it maintain its stitch quality as I speed up, and it sure did. And then down here I came around, made another U-turn, and then I came with that very, very short stitch there, and then I did a back tack as well right there. Nice and flat. What does it look like on the back? Let's see here. Just a moment, I'm going to trim the thread tail. And we have the sort of the persimmon colored thread on the underside. That's the bobbin thread, of course. And starting here, and I've got, again, the longest stitch length right there. And we come across, we do the back tacking, come down, come back. Remember that second row is the one where I'm making it faster, and then turn around again, and I have the really short stitch. And then back tacking. So this tells me that the fabric is happy and the machine's happy. The stitch appears to be happy. This is incredibly important to know and to be able to see. And so by me doing this, I was able to essentially test the stitch quality on a piece of fabric where I'm not having to try to see through, you know, is the fabric wrinkled, or is the stitch causing puckering? I'm quite happy with this this result, and I didn't know what the result was going to be. So, all right, let's do another. We'll do one more, and I'm going to take my other sample here, and I'm going to trim it so we can have 4 layers, because a machine of this power should be able to handle 4 layers and not really miss a beat at all. That's the goal, anyway. One of the reasons that sewing machines were made to multitask is because they were so expensive for people to buy. They needed one, and they needed it to sew many things. You know, if you were going to sew a very delicate fabric for maybe a dress, but then you also needed a machine that could sew, you know, heavy drapery fabric, or you know, fabric totes. You know, all sorts of different things people had to construct with their sewing machine, and so they needed it. Now this fabric here has a little bit of a. This is not. That's a. It's just a tear in the fabric. I'm not worried about that. That won't affect my stitches any, I don't believe. All right, so I've got 4 layers here, and we'll get this under the foot. Foot clearance on this machine, for those of you who may have wondered, is actually pretty good. Not bad. Sewing machines from this era will vary in terms of how long their longest stitch is. This one reminds me, this machine reminds me, or its stitch reminds me a little bit of the Kenmore and White rotaries. They have wonderful stitches, and they have a long stitch, not the longest you've ever seen. And over time, I think I may mention, as we go through time, as the decades roll by, machines would end up getting the capacity to make longer and longer stitches to what they do today. Now, all right, going to sew. Again, this is 4 layers. So doing a long straight stitch, did some back tacking, and I'm giving it a decent pace here, but not super fast. Again, this machine has power. I'm not worried about overpowering the machine so much as I don't want the machine to miss a stitch because I asked it to chew through something dense or thick too quickly. And for many people, their sewing skill really puts them at a certain speed anyway. I've met a few sewers who can really sew like grease lightning, but they're far and few between. Okay, this time I'm going to shorten our stitch with the heavier fabric. Go kind of in the middle there. One of the nice things about a straight stitch sewing machine is the foot does not have as much contact with the fabric as, say, a wider foot that allows zigzag, and you can do little turns like that I just did. And I'll back tack, lock in my stitch. All right, let's see. We'll come over and make one more row, folks, and then I think that will be the end of the testing here. But I'm so far I'm quite pleased with what I'm seeing. And all right, let's see here. Let's go back and we'll do a long stitch again. And this time I'll see if I can sew a little bit faster. Whoops. Interesting. So I've been hearing a clank, and I went in and I didn't see anything with my upper thread, so I'm looking at my lower thread and I wonder if something has happened to my bobbin thread. What is going on here? What are we doing? Something is not quite right. And I'm wondering if my bobbin thread has somehow gotten loosened or tangled in some way. The tension seems beautiful on the machine, so we'll have to see. We'll have to take a look and investigate. So I have basically pulled out the bobbin case and the bobbin. I did not find a thread entanglement. I'm going to reinsert the bobbin back into the bobbin case again. I seem to have really good, good tension on the bobbin case. I don't believe it's overly tightened. Sometimes if you have tension that is a little too tight, it can cause your thread to jam or break, and that can actually create a host of woeful issues. But let's see here. I'm going to try this again. I'm not impressed with that. I was impressed until I wasn't, as they say. All right, here comes our bobbin thread. One of the things you can do, if you ever run into a problem and you're like, well, I don't really know what's causing my problem. One of the things you can do is reset. Sometimes it means reinstalling a needle, which I'm not doing here. Rethreading your machine, rethreading your bobbin case. And it sounds odd. It's like, well, if why would you have to do that? That can happen because sometimes you've missed something. You've missed, maybe you've missed a thread guide, or you've got something thread coiled on itself. Any number of things can happen. So I'm going to investigate this. See if we can do better. All right. Before I do that, I'm going to show you the stitches it was making. So let's look at those. Let's get an idea. Was there a problem with the stitch before we heard the machine go clank and it quit working? Let's look. When I first look at this, I'm not really seeing anything. I've got a nice solid long stitch. I come down, turn around. I'm trying to keep this focused closer to you guys so you can see the stitch better. And then I come around. I actually made this little turn with my very short stitch back down to the long stitch. Well, what about the other side? Just like before with the 2 layers, I've got my long stitch length here. I come around, I make my turn over here. I come back with the short stitch and then the back tacking. When I look at my stitches, everything seems to look hunky-dory, but something's not quite right. And what do you guys think? I think it has something to do with the tension somewhere. Not sure where, but something's not happy here. Got to find out what it is. I'm going to keep using these 4 layers because there doesn't seem to be any issue with the stitches. If you have bad stitches and you may want to grab a new set of grab a new fabric sample so you can tell which stitch is which. But in this case, the original stitches I just put down seem to be fine. All right, we're going to go back to long stitch length. Get out of there. We'll go right down the center here. And see if it will run. It seems happy to run, and I haven't looked underneath, but right now that top stitch looks gorgeous. Well, that sure is new. Usually, but not always, a machine normally talks to you because it doesn't make a stitch properly because it's not happy for whatever reason. Now, this machine is making beautiful stitches. So why did it just jam and stop? I wonder. Okay. Now, I have a theory. Sewing machines that are not digital, when you work to control the length of the stitch and you start to get down, I'm going to zoom in here so instead of just watching my finger, you can maybe see some of the numbers here in this light. You can see the scale. We have 0. From here to here is 0. And then we get, I can see up here is 5, 4, 3, 2, and there's 1. So you start to get out of 0 and into 1. My theory is this, everyone, and you tell me if maybe I'm off. I have a theory, and that has to do with how short that stitch was. When you try to make a stitch that is incredibly short, where the fabric is just barely moving, some machines will not allow this. Well, eventually, any machine, if you set it too far off from any length, it will create a mess. It will literally create a giant nest or ball of thread, and it will create a thread jam. So, what I want to do is I'm going to come away from that short stitch. I'm going to go up to 3. Let's get right. It's going to be shorter, but not as short as I had before. And I want to see, now I did short stitches fine on the 2 layers of fabric. So what are the variables? If we think about this as an experiment in a lab, we've got the layers of fabric, right? And we have the stitch length, and those are the only 2 things I've been changing. Stitch quality has not moved an inch, which is very unusual. Okay, now I've got the machine set up. I'm going to ask it to sew 4 layers, and we've shortened the stitch, but not as short as it was before. Let's see if it will be happier. Well, I just ran 4 layers, sort of medium slow pace to a slightly faster pace. It did it. It didn't complain. It did not. I'm going to make one more row here. Well, this is very interesting, and I think I could be wrong, everyone. My theory could not be worth nothing, but right now we'll take another look at these stitches, because this is just amazing that this machine has a beautifully balanced stitch. I mean, it is incredible. Let's get over here. We'll get into see if we can get a closer view of these stitches. Okay, so the rows in the center I've been doing, and I tell you, the stitches are some of the most balanced I've ever seen, and I've been able to go with 4 layers slower and faster. I never go with any machine lightning fast when I'm sewing like this. The machines can do it, but again, let's say you go super fast with the long stitch. As that stitch shrinks, as it shortens, if you've ever seen an animation of how a stitch is formed by a side-loading bobbin shuttle system like this one, remember that the machine is essentially tying a lace or a knot to create that stitch in the fabric. And when you shorten that stitch, if you speed up the machine, I don't remember going that fast when it did this before. When you speed up the machine, now it has very little time to do everything you're asking it to do, because you're asking it to do it more quickly, right? And you've already given it less room. So I don't know. This machine, it's the most remarkable thing. I love the stitches. I like the stitch quality. And I am going to, at this point, because the stitches look so nice, I believe that I got that stitch too short. And, maybe can you get a shorter stitch with 2 layers of fabric like I did earlier, right here, and maybe sew a little faster. But remember, when you start adding more and more layers, I mean, look at the sandwich we've got here. Remember, this machine has got to do what it's doing really quickly in a short amount of space, and now it's got 4 layers. So I'm going to, at this point, unless any of my viewers have an alternate theory that can, maybe you do have an idea, but I believe that this machine can sew, but I also know that when it comes to shortening that stitch, as this lever starts to get closer to 0, it is a little more sensitive than some, because it will sew a very short stitch. I did it on 2 layers, but when I put 4 layers, if I start to go anything I'll have to go back and look at the video, see how slow I was going on the 4 layers. But that's when it happened, on a short stitch, 4 layers. And when I changed the stitch length, you know, I tried it again way up here in the longest, but then I came back down to like 2.5 to 3, something like that, which is fairly short for this machine. And it didn't seem to have an issue. Now, another thing that could be an issue is I had loosened the knob, right? Because I wanted to be able to just put it down in reverse. Well, if you do that, this knob is not, the lever is not locked in. Now, with many fabrics, that may not matter. When you deal with multiple layers, heavier fabrics, sometimes they can actually pull the lever out of adjustment, right? You'll see your stitch length change because the machine is having to work a lot harder to do what it's doing, and that can happen. That's one of the reasons they created this adjustment, this setting here, right? So, yeah, that is very curious. I believe that is what is happening here. I noticed that this machine seems to have a bias with tighter stitch, greater thread tension above. The bobbin thread seems lovely, but I'm not getting any stitch issues. The balance of the stitch is beautiful. So if my tension adjustments here, if they were too tight or too loose, I would either be getting loopy threads in the stitch, or I'd be getting puckering, and I'm not getting any of those. So, wow, mystery. I think the only time I had the issues, like I said, is when we were approaching 0 with 4 layers. So that is a good time to remind everyone that any analog device, when you're asking it to really split hairs, and we really are, when we get down here close to 0, just look at where you are. And I believe some sewing machines may tolerate that more and some less, because the machine is fully lubricated. And my stitches look too good to tell me there's a tension issue. And I think stitch length and fabric density is all I've got left. What do you think, everyone? Put your comments down there if you have a theory, or if you think my theory holds any water whatsoever, let me know. If you own this machine, let me know what your thoughts are. Maybe you are familiar with this, or maybe you've had this experience with another brand or model. Anything is possible. But in any event, I really appreciate all of you watching and following along as I have worked on this machine. And if you have not subscribed, just hit the subscribe button. And if you would like, you can certainly donate to the channel. It helps me raise funds for purchasing and saving more of these amazing, incredible devices from our consumer past. Thank you all for watching. We'll see you next time.